So the Pixel 10 Pro Fold released this week, and honestly, it's easy to say this is probably one of the most incredible pieces of tech I've ever laid my hands on. Not only is this probably one of the most impressive pieces of tech of 2025, but probably one of the best pieces of tech I've actually ever used. Now for myself, the reason this sort of becomes a bit of a shock factor is mainly because this is actually the first foldable I've ever had the pleasure of using in the first place. And on top of this being my first foldable experience, it's also actually been a surprisingly incredible experience. Now I almost sort of always thought that foldables were kind of gimmicky in the first place, up until actually seeing the Samsung Z Flip 7 or 6. I think it's the 7 that came out this year. And that's the first time that foldables actually caught my eye. And when I got to see this a little bit early at Google's event this year, I was legitimately surprised. I think on their event date, I spent maybe like 4 minutes with this thing, but now actually having a chance to really truly use it in its full capacity, consider myself impressed. Now on top of that, I did recently get back into Android after about a 10-year hiatus, having only used iOS. In August, I had the chance to review the Nothing Phone 3, and in September, I did have a chance to check out the Pixel 10 Pro, both of which exceeded my expectations. Now, as somebody who has taken that extended break from Android, it really truly has gotten so much better. Talking about this device though, at the same time, I'm an absolute iPad mini diehard, so to combine both my phone and tablet into one device is actually kind of crazy. Now leaning into that whole tablet factor, it really is kind of obscene that foldables have matured enough that they truly are just foldable tablets that can't go right into your pocket if you need them to, without really changing normal phone factor and size. And while folded up, it might only be slightly thicker than a modern day smartphone. When opened up, this thing is pretty much as thin as something like the iPad Pro or Apple's recent iPhone Air. The reason why this is even impressive in the first place, to me at least, is because you get the entire normal smartphone experience if you keep this thing closed. And then the second you open it up, this thing is actually a full-on tablet. Like, it doesn't compromise in that space whatsoever. Now for myself, I'm actually more of a tablet user than a smartphone user, if anything, because I'm a person that loves to sort of use dumb phones at the same time alongside perhaps my iPad mini. So for myself to lean heavier into this tablet experience, again, the fact that it's pretty much uncompromising, I get my full usage for things like reading, gaming, and of course media. And likewise, from a build and design standpoint, Google really did do a great job with this moonstone colorway that I like. This does also come in jade. I'm actually going to This does also come in jade, which is what I have on my Pixel 10 Pro, but I think I definitely prefer the moonstone colorway. It just looks so clean. Again, what sort of makes me feel like an old man living in the future is the fact that this is just so flippin' compact considering what this actually is. If anything, this is probably one of the most obscene engineering marvels I've ever seen, if not absurdity of technology, and trust me when I say that it's actually a good thing. But the hinge itself opens and folds up perfectly flat, which is something that I've seen in some other videos on past foldables where they didn't quite open up fully or flat, so that's definitely not the case here, and I appreciate how well the hinge actually works. One thing I had to get used to was actually the amount of force that you need to actually pry this thing open. I say pry because it actually feels pretty hard to open it, which I think is a good thing because it goes to show how sturdy the hinge is. When it comes down to, you know, foldables and stuff, I typically be worried they get like loose over time, but it feels like this one should last a long time. I think Google says like 10 years or something. So I definitely appreciate the force needed to actually open this thing up. Likewise as well, I really have gotten used to the comfort of having a water and dust resistant device, and the fact that Google made this IP68 is just a huge bonus for myself. It is just one less thing to worry about, although I don't have any plans to dunk my phone into water or anything, but still nice to have. That, of course, they did bring over Pixel Snap this year, which is pretty much MagSafe, and that is a feature I've always loved on all my iOS devices. So for myself, this is awesome for any sort of magnetic stands or battery packs, and of course wireless charging if I do need to have that. Honestly, overall, they did an incredible job with the build and design of this thing. It's as premium as it can possibly get, which is why this thing is flippin' expensive. Up here in Canada, it is 2,400 bucks Canadian, which is quite a lot. So you sort of have to, you know, weigh the differences between how much, you know, a tablet costs alongside a smartphone. Both the tablet and the phone have to have flagship specs and stuff. So I guess the price point is going to be whether or not it's worth it for you. Now, separately from that, talking about both of the displays on here, the crazy thing is that they are pretty much uncompromising completely. What I mean by that is that the front display is a full-on 6.4-inch OLED display, which goes from 60 to 120 hertz. But again, this is going to give you a literal full smartphone experience. I originally thought the sort of squared off hinge here on the edge of the phone would make a huge difference in how I'd have to hold this thing, but honestly, it's been identical in usage to a normal smartphone. Granted, I am right-handed, so this fits perfectly into my palm, but even tossing this into my left hand, it's really not that different either way. But honestly, side by side, the screen is pretty much full matching my Pixel 10 Pro, which I loved in the first place. So yeah, good job Google not skimping on the front screen. And naturally, again, this is gonna have that whole tablet form factor. So if you do just wanna crank this thing open, you pretty much have an 8-inch tablet that gives you a solid, almost square tablet experience. Because of this, you can enjoy all your media or content on either your front or internal screen. And I can imagine anybody who's doing any sort of crazy multitasking, the internal screen is gonna be the one for you. And there really is a good amount of screen real estate for myself here. For myself, over the last year and a bit, I actually just picked up reading for the first time since like elementary school. So I have been reading a ton on hand readers. On my small ass iPhone 13 mini I was reading, and naturally of course my iPad mini. So having a tablet like this that I can literally fit in my pocket has been awesome when I do want to catch some reading on the go. In my day-to-day at least, that's just a small thing that I actually place a huge amount of value in, and that's not something that I previously had before. Brightness as well, this really is a flagship in terms of its brightness. This does get up to 3000 nits outdoors, and of course indoors media and content is going to look incredible on here. OLED displays are OLED displays, so there's not much to hate about them. As for the cameras, it's kind of crazy. This comes with a grand total of 5 cameras, which is kind of nuts to say in the first place, but you do have a main 48 megapixel wide angle on the backside. You also have a 10.8 megapixel telephoto. In terms of the actual front facing camera, on the external screen, you have a 10 megapixel sensor. And when you open it up, the front facing camera is also that same sensor, 10 megapixels. Having tested it out, it's fine. It's nothing crazy. I can say across any of these cameras, they're mostly, the best word I can say is consistent. I can't say these sensors are gonna be on par with the recent iPhones that I've been testing, like the 17 Pro and the 17 Air, but they do still give an incredible image, and they do shoot in RAW as well, if that's something you're into, if you do like to muck around your photos in Lightroom. I think the biggest thing for all these sensors is that they need a lot of light to shine, which is primarily gonna be outdoors. I didn't have a lot of time to mess around with the cameras on here because it has been raining a ton actually, but I will throw up some sample photos of the main lens, ultra wide, as well as the telephoto. Again, if there is a lot of light, these cameras perform incredibly well, but they do sort of break apart a little bit as soon as it gets to low light. I think I'm gonna have to dive a little bit deeper into the cameras in my longer term review. I just didn't have a lot of time with these cameras to really put them to the test. I guess my main critique here would be that the ultra wide lens seems to have different colors compared to the main and the telephoto. Just something to note. Overall though, the cameras are actually pretty decent. I'd say if anything, again, the word comes to mind is consistent. Now, of course, while the cameras were simply okay, the one thing I can say is that Android 16 is absolutely incredible, honestly. Again, I took that 10-year break from Android entirely. Previous, I always found it a little bit sluggish. Of course, there's always an incredible amount of customization when it comes down to Android, but it just didn't quite do it for me. I found I had to, finick a lot with my different devices, reboot my system way too much. Now that is completely a different scenario with Android as it is today. And honestly, there are more cases than not now where I'm slowly leaning towards potentially going back to Android full time. Even my wife was messing around with my Pixel 10 Pro, and we were sort of both considering going back to Android full time because there's just so much to love here. I think a part of it as well is I did just discover Niagara Launcher, which is pretty badass. The amount of customization you can get between the launchers and the actual speed of these devices nowadays is hard not to love Android for what it is. That's not a Pixel 10 Pro Fold specific thing, just something that I thought I'd mention since I am spending a little bit more time on Android nowadays. Honestly, not to mention Gemini just simply destroys Apple Intelligence and Siri, which is something that I have been accustomed to using over the last decade or so, and it's simply hard not to love Gemini compared to Siri. I'm not trying to make this a comparison video, but more so my thoughts towards, I guess, why I've sort of grown to love this as well as the Pixel 10 Pro. They just did a really good job with the software, so I really dig it. Specific to the 10 Pro Fold though, I do have to say I absolutely love the whole split experience, which has been pretty badass when I'm using something like Microsoft Teams and Outlook during the daytime. I do work an office job, so having these two side by side is pretty badass. Otherwise, something like Reddit and YouTube has been a good combo that I've grown to use over the last week or so. I honestly kind of thought the whole split screen thing was sort of gimmicky in the past, but actually having used it, I can see why people use this a ton. This is massive for any sort of multitaskers. And a bit shocking as well is considering this is technically a tablet, there's a lot more consistency in the apps than I originally thought there would be. They're not going to be perfect like some apps like Apple Music, but I think that's more of an Apple thing versus a Pixel Pro Fold thing. I honestly just expected there to be more discrepancy between the normal apps and the tablet mode apps. So well done to developers as well as Google if you're doing things in the background for this. Just something I wasn't actually expecting. Now coming down to the battery, I can say I'm not the absolute heaviest user in the world. This ends up being like a day-and-a-half battery for myself because I'm not using it at all hours of the day. It's hard for me to sort of gauge the battery for anybody, frankly, because my usage is going to be different from yours. It's going to be dependent on your cellular connectivity, the apps you're running in the background, how much you're using the split screen, and everything in between. But for myself, this has been about a day-and-a-half battery. In my world, I have a charger at my desk. When I'm in the car heading to the office, I pretty much have a charger wherever I go, so I never really need to worry about battery. And frankly, I'm going to check what my screen on time is right now for today. How do I check that? Okay, I found the setting. Right now I'm at 75% battery, and my usage since last charge, 5 hours and 9 minutes. So to be at 75% is kind of bonkers. So yeah, the battery, not actually surprisingly, has been great for my usage. Now with that, I want to talk about the performance and stuff because the use cases for a lot of people is going to be almost endless. And this is going to be dependent on a lot of different people. Again, for myself, I'm sort of the everyday user, but I love reading and I love media. So those are the two things that I find value in this big ass tablet phone / phone. But the use cases are going to be vast for a load of people. There's going to be the multitaskers. Again, if you're going to be split screening like crazy, that's actually pretty badass. I can see that being awesome for simply the people who literally just want it. Commuters, I talked to my buddies about whether or not they would ever consider a foldable. And they said if there was still public transport commuting on the train or the bus, they definitely consider a foldable, because that'd be pretty awesome for any sort of commuters. And then of course there's going to be the gamers. I didn't spend too much time gaming on here because I don't really game on mobile, if I'm honest. I did a little bit of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, Diablo Immortal. It handled it perfectly well. The screen's large, but from my experience, it's not too different from using it on a normal phone, frankly. But I can imagine people who are like, you know, diving into Genshin Impact or Call of Duty on here, having a larger screen is going to be awesome. Now that said, I want to talk about the Tensor G5 because I found a lot of the reviews previously, people were sort of complaining about the number on the benchmarks, which I really just don't like benchmarks as a metric for how a chipset performs. Frankly, yeah, sure, having a higher number is going to be better, but when it comes down to actual everyday usage, when I've tried every single thing on here, I've tried gaming on here, I've done some editing and CapCut on Instagram edits, everything has been absolutely incredible in terms of the performance. Likewise, the 16 gigs of RAM has all my apps stored in the background. If I want to swipe between them, there hasn't been any scenario where this hasn't been fast enough. Maybe it's because I'm not the power user I once was, perhaps, but honestly, in terms of the performance, I don't know how much faster I want to open my apps than instant. I can definitely say for the price point, sure, maybe that benchmark number could be closer to Apple or the Snapdragon setups that the Samsungs have, but in actual everyday practical usage, it feels the same as my iPhone, frankly, in terms of speed and performance. Now, overall, the Pixel 10 Pro Fold has been a bit of an eye-opener, if I'm completely honest. As a skeptic towards the whole foldable ecosystem, I can definitely see why these are finally hitting mainstream. For myself, again, the first time I really got my interest peaked from a foldable was the Z Fold 7 that released earlier this year. And again, having this in my hand at Google's event, it sort of changed my perspective on foldables in the first place. They did a damn good job with this thing. Foldables in general have definitely gotten mature finally, and I can see these actually being tangibly useful for pretty much anybody who wants the larger screen. The biggest thing for myself, and I've sort of mentioned this a lot in this video, I've said it multiple times, is that both of the experiences are completely uncompromising. The front screen isn't any less better because there's an internal screen, and the internal screen sure as hell is badass, especially if you're using it as the tablet and the multitasking and stuff. They did a damn good job. Now, to say, is this thing perfect? No, honestly, I don't think it is. As somebody who's an iPad mini diehard, I would have loved to have some sort of pen or stylus on here. I do a ton of writing. I have an expensive ass pencil set that I use to write my notes and to do journaling and all that. And there's no pencil or stylus on this, which would have been nice to have. I'm sure I can probably pick up some sort of third-party stylus and stuff, but that seamless integration won't be there. So that would have been something I love to have on here. Beyond that, I don't really have much to complain about this thing. Now, for reference, I have not tried any other foldables. So right now I'm trying my first foldable. If I sound overly positive, it's because it's my first time into the whole foldable thing. If the Z Fold 7 is way better, let me know in the comments. I would love to check that device out. Maybe I will. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this thing. I think it's kind of crazy. I'm hoping to do a longer term review once I have a little bit more time with it. But anyhow, I do appreciate you guys watching till the end. Till next time.